Hello, hello. So we are here with Dr. Simon. Welcome. So Dr. Simon, it's really nice to have you with us. Just for those that don't know the famous doctor, he is actually, he's got 3 degrees, amazing, in psychology and in pharmacy. You're also a pharmacist, I believe, right?
Yes, sir.
And also in, obviously, medicine. And he's too many accolades to speak about. He was associate professor, I believe. In which universities was that?
University of Kansas and the Kansas City College of Medicine and Bioscience, as well as the University of Truro that's a California university.
I see. And he's also the president of the Pain Management Institute in Kansas City. And we, in fact, did a lecture together at the Jewish Community Center. In fact, you pulled together, was a beautiful thing, many, many different people on non-opioid addiction. And it taught a lot of people how to deal basically with the real issues in life. Obviously, medicine is a wonderful tool, but there are other tools as well. And so the good doctor has consented to share with us something that is very, this reminds me of Dale Carnegie's book. What was the title of that book? How to Stop Worrying and Start Living.
I thought it was Making Friends and Influencing People, which
Right.
was another of his great books. My
So,
mother read that book often, and it was a keepsake for her. She loved that book.
Oh, yeah? Oh,
Yeah.
Wow. So this is really a very important thing. And I think that we're, in a certain sense, it's good to have this conversation. If I may say, I'm a little qualified in the subject as well, because I wrote a book called Kabbalah Love, From Fear to Love. And really, one of the key things of Kabbalah is the belief that basically we're either in a state of love or in a state of fear. And really, each state will counteract the other state. And so everybody wants to get out of anxiety. There's no question. The anxiety, in fact, basically, I saw a study, 500 million people, European study, the basis of all mental illness is fear, which is anxiety. And unfortunately, most of kind of the deep disturbances are related to anxiety. And anxiety is, like you put it very nicely here, it's worry, fret, and angst. I think those are practical terms instead of medical terms that we can all really realize. So I want to thank you very much for joining. And we really look forward to hearing very kind of non-medical, I shouldn't say that, non-opioid mechanisms or kind of non-drug mechanisms, which are kind of just your own mind, how your own mind can overcome worry. Because I'm a strong believer, as studies show now, that 40% of I think it was maybe anxiety and depression may be related to circumstances, but 60% is up to us. So there's a large percentage that there are things that we can do. And I look through the slides briefly, and I see that some amazing stuff. So I'm just going to go, and then you can just take it away. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Rabbi. And one of the things I want to point out, and this is something that Rabbi Weinberg and I had discussed prior to this, and that's that basically I would talk about the physical aspect, and he would talk more about the spiritual aspect or religious aspect of trying to control this problem that we call worry as such. And if you remember the lead slide, of course, Alfred E. Newman from the Mad magazine, What Me Worry, would be an interesting way to approach this subject. But worry is normal. And if you go back to the very early men and women who lived with dinosaurs and in caves and so forth, if they didn't worry about what was going on around them, if they weren't aware of dangers, it would have cost them their lives. And so we developed early on in the human a system response called the fight or flight syndrome, meaning that in times of extreme danger, we would either have to fight or run away. And to do that, our bodies developed a way to cause that to happen. In other words, if we are startled and we are in fear, our blood pressure goes up, our heart is putting out more blood, but the blood is shunted to muscles and away from digestion. And in that sense, we are preparing ourselves to either fight or run away. Our vision changes so that we are seeing things better, that they're close up. We are breathing more efficiently, and we are turning ourselves very quickly into a fight or runaway machine. So that is built into us. What happens today is that we don't have dinosaurs that are chasing us, but depending on where we live, if we lived in a very busy urban area, we would have many, many people around us, and therefore we would think of things like subways and buses and bicycles on the street and a lot of people coming in contact with us and so forth. That may induce certain types of stress that people who live in smaller communities don't really have to think about very much because it's different lifestyle. So if we define the worry today, basically we're talking about dwelling on difficulties or problems, and this can induce a state of anxiety over actual problems or potential problems, the what ifs in life, and there's a lot of those. And if this becomes more than a reaction which is healthy, in other words, as we move to the unhealthy side and we lose our balance in assessing risks, that's when the worry, which can be a healthy thing and a normal thing and part of our survival, becomes a threat to our existence because, as it says here in the bottom right, worry doesn't prevent disaster, but it does prevent joy. It stops us from living in the moment because we can become literally paralyzed by fear. And if you're scary horror movies that I watched a lot of when I was young, that's exactly what you saw, is that type of thing. Next slide, please.
So the next slide is, let's do this.
So we talked about the healthy aspect of worrying, right? It's a normal thing, and quite honestly, it leads to problem solving, right? Could you move? There we go. It leads to problem solving, and in that sense, it's good. So if we are worrying that it's raining heavily outside, we say, okay, we will get an umbrella, we will put on a raincoat and so forth so we won't get wet. It's a problem solving. But worry can become unhealthy if we worry about things that aren't real. And the example here is the child who says, there's a monster in my closet, there's a monster under the bed. You can look under the bed with the child with a flashlight. He sees no monster, but he says, when you leave, the monster's coming back, right? So he's worrying about things that aren't real. We talked about being paralyzed by worry, and that's the second one there. And then one that is, unfortunately, from my practice lifetime, both in pharmacy and in medicine, became a very, very real thing. In the 60s the country went through a period of the mother's little helpers. In fact, people who know about John Kennedy's life know that due to his medical condition, he was treated with amphetamines almost every day. And that was quite chic. You would take amphetamines during the day, which were stimulants to speed you up. And then at night, of course, because you wanted to go to bed, you would need to take medicines that calmed you down, that were just the opposite. And so this Mother's Little Helpers, and there were songs about that, was very, very common. In fact, the most frequent prescriptions that are used outside of, say, antibiotics are really those that treat our psychiatric symptoms, whether it is depression or worry or stress, as it were. And a lot of people are familiar back again in I think it was either the 60s or probably the 70s, Barbara Streisand did a movie with Ryan O'Neal, and they're in a store, and they're very stressed out, and he has a panic attack, and Barbara Streisand said, "Does anybody have a Valium?" And everybody in the store pops the lid off a bottle and says, "Here, take one of mine." You know, it was that common. In more modern generations, there was a book, The Prozac Nation, right? We are a country of pill use. We are a country that has become accepting that if we have a problem, there is a pill that will bring us an answer. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but if that is your only answer and it becomes the answer above all else, then it may be an issue. And especially those who lose control of their use of pills or alcohol in an effort to seek shelter, then we get into the addiction side, which is another aspect. Of course, worry can be one of those things that interferes with sleep. If you don't sleep, you're 7 times more likely, if you don't sleep, you will become depressed. If you are depressed and you don't sleep, you're 7 times more likely to die by suicide. And so that's a very real situation that we have to contend with. So these are signs that the worry is overtaking you. Also, if your worry is inconsistent with reality. So for a child, you would say monster under the bed. But the news media has not helped this COVID-19 crisis. COVID-19 is very real. We've had over 100,000 deaths here in the United States from it, but there is a tremendous amount of misinformation out there as well. And people who are hiding in their homes, afraid to come into any contact with other people, put their bags in the garage floor for 3 days before they go into them and so forth. You've got to do things that are consistent with reality and not inconsistent. And of course, worry interferes with the enjoyment of life, as we said in the last slide. And in fact, if you look at this right bottom corner, it says, "I worry that I don't have something to worry about."
That's the American way.
That's right. You got to worry. Well, I must tell you, I think it's the American Jewish way, because I know that my relatives always had to worry about something, and they felt if they worried about it, then the bad things wouldn't happen. So the worry actually had a very real effect at keeping away the problem, whatever the problem was. If you only worried about it, it wouldn't happen. And that much is there. In fact, I want to bring up a study that I saw today that was just published in the American Journal of Geriatric Medicine, coming out of Bar-Ilan and the University of Haifa. In the geriatric population, and unfortunately or fortunately, whichever, I'm in that population now.
Don't look it.
Okay. Oh, thank you very much. We'll get your eyes checked soon. Don't worry about it. The fact is that when we isolate ourselves, whether it is real or imagined, that can bring out psychiatric illnesses, including worry, including depression, including loss of context in reality, and so forth. And so it's just to highlight the fact that we have to go back and say what is real and what is not real. There are plenty of things to worry about in real life, right? If I didn't worry that I might be in an accident when I got behind the wheel of a car, I wouldn't put on my seatbelt, right? So worry makes me drive in an appropriate fashion and not go 100 miles an hour in a 35-mile-an-hour zone. Worry makes me put on my seatbelt. Worry makes me pay attentive to driving and so forth. And so that's a positive sign. But if worry, because I'm so afraid of everything in the car, prevents me from driving, then it's unhealthy. And I think that's one of the things that we have to ask ourselves. Is the worry that we're having reasonable? Is there an action and so forth that I can take? In fact, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's move on to the next slide. And we'll come back to those concepts. What we want to achieve, what our body wants to achieve, and this is 7th grade science. Everybody learns about the process called homeostasis. Homeostasis means basically balance, and balance in all things. So one of the things that we have to establish is balance of both the physical side and our mind or emotional side. If we're talking about the body or the physical, that means activity, it means organ systems, it means motor coordination, performance, digestion, all of the things that relate to the body. And the mind, of course, means our mood. Or do we have a euphoric mood? Do we have an appropriate mood? Do we have a depressed mood? What is our drive and our energy? What's our motivation? What is our interest? And what's our resilience to any type of adversity? We have to have balance in all things. That's what we strive for. And so we need to check ourselves and say, are we doing the things that we need to do for our body and for our mind to attain, if we don't have it, or maintain, if we do have it, that glorious thing called homeostasis, all things in balance. And that's really what Rabbi and I are talking about today, both the physical side and the spiritual side coming together to create a whole and a successful whole at that. Next slide, please. And now let's talk about, we recognize the fact that we have worry. If it is a worry that is starting to get ahead of us down the unhealthy side, one effective way is to use a worry doll like they do in one of the Latin American countries. Actually, if you've ever traveled down in several of the Latin American countries, you can buy these little worry dolls. They're quite cute. And basically what you're supposed to do is hold on to the doll and tell the doll your worries. And then you transfer your worry to the doll. So the doll should worry and you shouldn't. If you don't have a worry, yeah, isn't that interesting? So
I'll tell you why if I can interrupt for one sec,
please.
I find it interesting because we know that when you verbalize something, it takes it out of the amygdala, which is the emotional, like fear-based center, and it puts it into the prefrontal lobes. So just the verbalization itself would do that, would like scientifically would make it work. So that's pretty cool.
It's interesting. When you verbalize something, you hear it as well. Yeah. And it has a different effect on you when you hear it.
Right.
And then if you just think it. And so, like you said, moving around in the brain or hearing it so that you can process it differently does allow you to work with it in a different way than if you just think about it. So that becomes worthwhile. So if you don't have a worry doll to give you worries to, set a time to worry. I mean, you can say, okay, I'm going to worry about these events. So let me sit down and organize my thoughts. I'm going to set time, this 15 minutes, this 30 minutes, whatever it is, and I'm going to write down all my worries.
Right.
And then when I write down a worry, let me see if I can come up with a solution, right? So here's my worry. Let me get a solution. If I can't come up with a solution, call Rabbi Zevi or call rabbis or call your best friend, seek advice from others, and look at the different suggestions. What's the benefit? What's the risk? What's the good or the bad with that suggestion? And develop solutions that soften what's called the worst case outcome. Many people believe that if there is a potential problem, the worst case of that problem is going to occur, right? Not only am I going to get COVID, I'm going to give it to my loved ones and we're all going to die. And that's what's going to happen. It's a worst case outcome, right? And that doesn't have to be true. Even if you were to come down with COVID-19, it doesn't mean you're going to die. In fact, what we're seeing today is that people aren't dying at the extent they did before. Whether this part is going to be proved true or not, it's interesting. A week ago, there was a report from Italy that said that the virus appears to be less of a threat to death than it was before. In other words, the effect of the virus is going down. That was poo-pooed by the CDC, and yet there's another report that came out today that said this very same thing, that the virus seems to have lost some potency in terms of it. And the reason for that is interesting from a medical perspective. If the virus, and a virus, it really is just a piece of RNA, right? We have DNA and RNA, so it's a little piece of RNA that is wrapped in fat. That's it. That's the whole
Sounds
virus.
like me.
Well, I think you have a few more cells going on than that. But that virus goes into your cell and tells your cell to reproduce more viruses, and that's what happens. But if you die, that kills the virus. It's gone. But if the virus weakens and you live, so does the virus. And so from a perspective of learning, and viruses can learn, things can learn, that could be happening, and explain it. So we'll have to see what proves out with this, but at least it's been said in a couple sources that the virus doesn't appear to be as life-threatening today as it was a few months back. So it's interesting.
What do you mean that it learns? What did it learn?
Well, it learned that if it killed you, that stops the reproduction of the virus. Okay, there is no more virus. If you die, you're the host. It doesn't, it can't spread. So this way it could continue to spread. If it softens so you didn't die, you might give it to somebody else and it continues to live in that sense.
I see.
It's interesting as it develops and mutates. So that's kind of things. And then ultimately, we have to accept that there are things we cannot control. You might want to go into that, Rabbi, more from a spiritual side, that there are things we can control. I can go to my thermostat, and if my air conditioning is working today, I can make it a little cooler, I can make it a little warmer. But, I can't tell the sun I don't want it to rain tomorrow because I've got a picnic, right? I can't control that. And I can worry that it might rain if I'm going to have a picnic. So what could I do? I could rent a shelter in case it rains. So I'll have a cover over our head. And there's things I can do, but that's part of the solution of coming up, focusing on our issue. What's my worry issue? It's going to rain. So what is my solution? I'm going to rent a covered area. So if it did rain, we could still have our picnic.
Right.
But I have to accept that it could rain, and that's not in my control.
Yeah.
All right. Could you move on to,
I'd like to comment, actually. You asked me to comment a little bit on that. So this is actually a very profound point. First of all, I want to say to you, thank you for what you're saying, because everything you're saying, I think, is brilliant. And if people do it, which is, writing down the worries, considering solutions, seeking advice, the Rebbe was very into that. Ask advice from those that are friends and are professional in that sphere. And they are experts at that. Obviously you're a doctor. So if I go to you for advice with medicine, that's something it's no big deal. And you have my interest in mind. So instead of me worrying about this, and the Rebbe was very into that, ask the doctor and follow his advice and forget about it. Don't worry about it. And anyway, but I do want to speak about this concept, which is accept that there are things that we cannot control, because a lot of our issues, in a certain sense, are not so much that we're worried, it's that we're angry. Because we have a premise that I basically should get my way. And an example for that is, imagine if, I come into a company and I say to the guard, I want you to close this down. The guard says, no. Would I be upset? No, because I don't own the company. Well, let's say I'm the boss of the company. I say, I want you to close it down. He says, no. I might get frustrated because the expectation, what?
And he might get fired.
And you're right, exactly. So the expectation translates into anger when I don't get my way. So that's very important. It's not the fact that I didn't get my way. It's the expectation to get my way. One of the things, unfortunately, I'm divorced, but one of the things that I really learned the hard way, and I think this is one of the best lessons of my life, I discussed this with a friend of mine, Dr. Kulik, who's a psychiatrist, and I said, I think that one of the most important things in life is knowing the word no. And a lot of us, I think, in the West, we're very spoiled. And I see certainly the immigrants, and it reminds me of our ancestors who were immigrants. They were not spoiled. They like, okay, I get it. Yes, no, move on. And so I think that when you get into a situation where something is very important to you, but you understand that you don't always get your way, that's life. Sometimes you don't get your way. And that in a way is maturity. So if you have that, so you're taking away, I can't give percentages, but I'm going to imagine 50% of your worries. Why? Because some of the worries are over real issues. Other worries are not even worries. They're related to the frustration of not getting my way. So it's like a little child. He's throwing a tantrum. Why are you throwing a tantrum? Because he didn't get your way. Is it a big deal? No, it's not a big deal. So as you grow up and as you learn, like you say, accept that there are things that we cannot control. That's a very important line. If we accept that there are things out of our control, then we reduce a tremendous, not only worry, I would say guilt. And if I'll conclude this thought with this, we know a lot of survivors, unfortunately, had survivor's guilt. What is survivor's guilt? It's I should have done more. So there was a story once that there was a man, he had terrible survivor's guilt, and he actually did a lot. He really went in, he saved a lot of people. He had tremendous survivor's guilt, and he went to many, many rabbis, and none of them could help him get over this guilt. So he came to the previous Rebbe, and the previous Rebbe said, yes, and why didn't you do more? And he understood that he couldn't have, right? So as the Rebbe once told somebody who was suffering from survivor's guilt, that if you do believe in God, ironically, that can take some of the guilt away, because it really, there's a power that is higher than us, and it's not in our control. So that doesn't mean I don't do what I can, but I accept that I can't control everything. And I think part of our problem in the West is many of us don't believe, or we're kind of very scientific. And so therefore, if something doesn't work out, well, I should have done this and I should have done that. Actually, you know what? You're not God. You couldn't have. You did your best, and keep on trying to do your best, and and move forward. Anyway, so that's my my little interchange.
I have to, because of what you just said, it reminds me of a teacher that I had in junior college, who was a brilliant man who had a number of sayings, kind of like the Yogi Berra of the junior college. And one of the sayings that he would frequently repeat was, if the best you can do is the best you can do, then that's the best you can do. And it's awfully hard to argue with that. By the way, I just wanted to correct the story of the worry doll. After you tell your doll the worry, you put it under your pillow so you can sleep on it, and either your worry will be gone or you'll have a solution to it the next day. So either way, it's a positive. Okay. Either way. So how do we challenge these anxious or negative thoughts that we get? Well, we have to look again, we have to back up and develop perspective. The right corner and the bottom says, don't worry too much about what others think of you. They're too busy worrying about what you think of them, right? It's the one who has to have something to worry about. So again, if your thought is that it's all or nothing, right? It's the worst case scenario, then where's the middle ground, right? Those people who feel that the worst case will always occur need to step back and say, is that really true? Is it always the worst case? People tend to overgeneralize, and there is no way out should this happen, right? If I get the COVID, I know I'm going to die. That's all there is to it. Not that I could be one of the 82 or 86% of the people that have very minimal, if any, symptoms, right? And the fact is that we have to take a step back and say, is that really right? Or is that a fear reaction that I'm hearing myself say? Focusing on the negative. If any positive thought comes up, but that's not going to happen to me. Do you deserve it? And that's something, again, why do we deserve all this negativity? Maybe people feel guilty about something, and this is some sort of a penance that God is giving this to them, or nature is giving them, or luck is giving them, whichever, that that they always deserve and they always get the worst, labeling yourself a failure due to expected outcomes. And that one is a much bigger one, right? I expect to be the number one. I always expect to be the fastest, the strongest, the smartest, whatever, but yet I fail to live up to those. And as a result, I'm a failure. I'm a Charlie Brown, and I can never do anything right. But was the outcome that you expected realistic in the first place? And again, that's what standing back and looking this from a perspective, or asking someone else who doesn't see it from your eyes, but sees it through their eyes, asking someone else to comment on that. And then again, assuming responsibility for things beyond our control. And we talked about that during the last slide. So these types of thoughts that are on this slide are really challenging to us. And if we feel that we're slipping into that type of a problem, it is time to step back or to get a different perspective on it. And if you want to bring up the next slide, or did you have something to say about this slide as well?
Yeah, one thing you mentioned, it reminded me, when the Rebbe, he had a heart attack. I think when people have a heart attack, there's a strong likelihood of another one.
Oh, absolutely.
And so the doctor, I think, he wanted him to sort of reduce his work schedule. So the Rebbe had a tremendous work schedule, not physical intensive, but he would answer everybody's letters. And
sure.
The Rebbe insisted on continuing. Very interesting, because I think this is useful to the conversation. The Rebbe said, one of the things that make people feel better, and I see this in my own life, is that when they do something meaningful. So sometimes I think that it's actually a big mistake for people to take too much time off. Oh, I just need 2 weeks to heal or something. No, be involved in meaningful activity, because that makes, as the Rebbe says, peace comes from purpose. So ironically, a lot of the way we think in the Western world, which is all about not having a purpose, not having obligations, and then I'll be at peace. No, it's the exact opposite that's true. When you do have obligations, when a woman is a mother and she's busy, or when a man has meaningful work or whatever you're involved in, that is exactly when you feel good, because we also have a soul and we don't like to just kind of have existential kind of angst. So that's another important thing. But the Rebbe actually said to the doctor, apart from the fact that he felt that it was a good idea that he should be involved in his work, he said, so the doctor says, that there's like a 70% chance of recurrence. So the doctor wanted to see, impress the Rebbe with the severity. He said, did you understand what I said? So the Rebbe said, yes, you said there's a 30% chance it won't come back. So,
there you go.
Right. So I think, and I've seen this in my own life, I think the brain is a bit like a muscle, and you can train it. The more you put positive thinking in your mind, and I'll just throw this in now because I teach this a lot and it's helped a lot of people and it helps me. If you actually think positive thoughts as soon as you wake up, you thank God for your soul. This shifts because the train of thoughts goes from the first thought of the day. And so the more you train your mind, my mind almost automatically, when I see something negative, it almost automatically shifts it to a positive. And so it's a wonderful thing, because instead of, God forbid, it's very easy. And it's not my nature. My nature is more of a worrier. So the fact is that it shows that your mind can either show you everything that's problematic, or it could be busy showing you all the solutions. Now, both of them may not be 100% correct, but which way is better?
You're absolutely right. And in fact, this is the 7th slide. This is our last slide. Amazing how it comes out to just 7. But the idea of how to break this worry cycle, if we have this worry cycle, and you just came up with a
Hello? Hello? It looks like we got a little bit of a break there. I hope Dr. Simon will come back momentarily. So while he's, oh,
Are you there? Are you
yeah,
there?
yeah.
Can you
So
hear me?
yeah, now I can. Yeah, it just broke
Okay.
up. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. What I said was that this is our seventh slide, and
Yeah.
this is our last slide.
Yeah.
So this talk was made in 7 slides. The idea that you just came up with is a very good way, and so are these other options. If people have a worry cycle that they're unable to break from some of the techniques that we talked about, get physical. Whatever your exercise is, whether it's walking, whether it's doing push-ups or sit-ups, it's not as important what you do, is the fact that when you exercise enough, you release endorphins. Endorphins are our body's feel-good drug that's in our brain, and they are released. You've heard of people talk about a runner's high, right? When you exercise and you're expending energy, the body will release endorphins and you will feel better. And just like you were saying, thanking God in the morning, I like to do my exercises first thing in the morning, sort of set the day. The other type of thing that we can do is relaxed breathing. Now, relaxed breathing is something that we can learn in yoga or Tai Chi, or even sitting in a chair and relaxing, taking deep breaths in and deep breaths out. This is a good technique if you're having trouble falling asleep at night. You breathe in for 5 seconds, you breathe out for 7 seconds. You breathe in for 5 seconds, which means you're inhaling to the count of 1,000, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, 5, which is a big inhalation. And then as you're exhaling, you count to 7. So 5 on the in, 7 on the out. This is a relaxed breathing technique. Meditations or mindfulness. These are very good ways to, again, put yourself into a relaxed mode. Progressive muscle relaxation, also used to help you fall asleep. Very interesting technique. Start at the top of your head and tighten the muscles at the top of your head, then your ears, then your chin and your neck and your chest and your shoulders and your elbows and your hands and your trunk and your upper leg and your lower leg and your feet, and finally out the toes. This process can take several minutes, and you do tighten, physically tighten the muscle, right? You know you can tighten muscles in your face, and you know you can tighten muscles in your ears and whatever. Tighten them, but it's from the top down, and you will relax and feel better and calmer after that. And ultimately, one of the things we've addressed several times in this process is talking to a sympathetic ear, someone who will both listen and perhaps even better offer you some very positive advice. The bottom corner of the screen really sums it up. It says, do you have a problem in life? If you do, can you do something about it? Yes. Then why worry if you can do something about it? If you can't do anything about it, why worry? Because it's out of your control. And of course, the top one says, do you really have a problem? If you don't, then why worry? Because you don't have a problem. So all of those things are there. And hopefully, if you are a worrier, you have found something to help you in what the Rabbi and I have talked about this afternoon. And you can carry it with you. You don't need a prescription for it. You don't need to write it down on a card. You can remember it and do those things every day to help you overcome the worry cycle that you have. And with that, I wish you very well. Rabbi, is there anything you'd like to say in conclusion?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you very much. I've been reading and learning about this for a long time, and I think this has been one of the best teachings that I've heard. Very simple, and I really encourage everybody. And I congratulate you if you got up to here. I know we're the ADD generation, so it's usually 1 minute. But the thing is that life is real, and I think that we're all energy. And basically that energy is either going to be positive or negative. There's really no in-between state. I mean, there's maybe very bad and very good, but there's no like just line in the middle. You know, it's basically towards the positive and the negative. And I think that if any of us use these techniques that you've given us, it's really the first step to get out of that negative cycle. And I want to say to people that it's really important. It's, you know, we now know that worry has, like you said in the beginning, it has all these physical ailments, but certainly takes away the joy. And also it causes depression, because eventually a person doesn't like being in anxiety, doesn't like being sad all the time. And that itself is a terrible situation. And so, you know, I mean, like you said, God forbid if it couples with not sleeping. So dealing with worry is perhaps the most important health thing you will do, because it also weakens the immune system. And the immune system is what we need. That's the real medicine cabinet. That's the thing that's helping us more than all the medicine in the world. And so it's really important to right now stop and say, okay, what am I going to do from this lecture? What are the things that I'm practically going to do? And really, if you want to succeed, it takes time. You'll become an expert at it, but you got to do it at least 5 times for it to become a habit. So you have to work at it, and eventually it will become a habit, and you will succeed. And just 2 other points, which I wanted to bring up. You sort of reminded me, 2 things that the Rebbe says. So sometimes there are things that we can do nothing about. And there are 2 things that we can do. These are spiritual techniques, and I do them a lot, and they're quite successful. And one of them, there's a verse that says, Hashlech al Hashem yehavcha v'hu yichak alecha. Basically, modern English, throw your problems to God, and he will carry them for you. So sometimes I actually just go like this. Okay, this is yours now. And it works. What can I say? You can't argue with science. It works. The second thing is, think positive. This is very, very interesting. And I'm going to give you the spiritual perspective of this. That actually, we are creating reality, right? This is a lot of quantum physics as well. And words are real. They're real things. Even thoughts are real. And so, in a certain sense, you know, they call it the law of attraction, but I like to refer it more the law of reaction. But from a Kabbalistic perspective, the way it works is that if you want to call it the idea, the thought process manifests. And therefore, by simply changing the thought, you don't even have to, you know, we're all like, do I believe it? Doesn't matter if you believe it. You take medicine, whether you know if it works or not. Just tell yourself what you want the reality to be. So if, God forbid, somebody's child is ill, to say, God will help. That's all you have to say, God will help. By just saying that, it's like you go into the source code and you make that happen. And that's the concept called trach gut v'zayin gut. Think good and it will be good. So let me give us all a blessing that, after all, I'm a rabbi, that we should all use both the techniques that you've given and the techniques that I'm bringing down from Jewish mysticism. This one's so simple. Just think good. You don't have to believe it. Just say it. And may God actually step in and bring the Mashiach and save us from all worries. May we see with our own eyes only beautiful blessings and peace and health, and only love and goodness and kindness. And once again, Doctor, I want to say you've been very generous with your time and your lectures. I've been to some of your lectures. I find you to be from the best. You're very, very succinct, and you know your stuff, and you say it over well. So I really appreciate very much the fact that you gave us your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.